Timing. Good afternoon, everyone. We are, it started working. It wasn't working at first. We'll see how well this one does. This one is connected through the app. Hopefully it works okay, but it may fuzz out on us. Got this one over here, seems to be working. So where we are at, we have taken care of unit or chapter 3. We worked through it. We did 4. We had a work session on Tuesday. So now we are here with chapter 5, financial math on savings. So we'll kind of be looking at, how savings works as far as part of a retirement plan, if you want, or any other thing. How does earning interest on money work? We'll have time next Tuesday to take a look at it, to work through the homework. Hopefully you're keeping up, because as you see here, we've got 6, which will be the loan part of financial math. The thing is, we'll provide you with a financial calculator, an online one, so nothing you have to buy or anything, but one you'll have access to. Once you learn how to use it for this stuff we're doing, you'll see you basically learn how to use it for loans as well, but a few things just change slightly. And then we will have some time to review for the midterm, and then take the midterm and move forward. Okay, the midterm is a paper and pencil type test. You get to you're welcome to use your computer with all the resources. You could use your phone if you wanted to, and you get to use your notes as well. Okay, so let's get into lesson 5. And there's several resources. What I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to open up the simple interest calculator. It'll open up in a tab here for us. We may need to, we will use this at some point, because we'll go through the quiz questions. And then there's also let's see what they call it, another financial calculator that is, we'll see compound interest. This is the one that you would use for most cases, so financial calculator. I'll open that. So we've got our 2 tabs open, and when you do the homework, I would suggest having these open and ready to use. This one is actually also an app you can download to your phone. If you want to do that, that's fine too. Okay, and then there's some other resources in here which I'll talk about as we go through. So I've got a slide deck. Okay, so first of all, we'll talk simply about how to manage your money, because that's what this whole section is, the math of finances, money. We live in a system where, a couple hundred years ago, you could probably barter and trade for things. While you still can do a little bit, now it's really, most things are based upon an economy where you work for somebody, you get some payments, you take those payments, those cash, and you're able to buy your food and all the things you need. So we're going to look at how to take control of your finances so that you can control them, that they don't have to control you. We'll look at the power of compounding interest, that how it grows over time. This is going to be similar to the percent changes and the exponential functions we saw in chapter 3. And then today we're going to look at savings plans. The next lesson 6 will look at loan payments, because sometimes you need to borrow the money to have something. If you're going to work, maybe you need a car now, but you don't have all the money to pay for it, so take out a loan. we all need a place to live. But few of us have the cash to just put down for a house. So we borrow that money while we can and move forward. So taking control of your finances. Now, you won't necessarily see this directly in the homework, but these principles are there. So one thing is you want to know how much money you have, so you're not spending more than you have. We don't use paper checks as much as we used to, maybe say even as little as 10 years ago, but you could still overdraw your checking account by making a purchase more than what you have in there. And the problem with that is oftentimes there's additional fees for that. So to control things, you've got to know what you spend. So that involves keeping track of what you're spending. Again, we have a lot of plastic. We could use that, or we even have apps, so we don't even have, we just wave our phone and it pays for us. But we need to know what we're spending. Not to buy on impulse, because if you just buy on impulse, it's unplanned. That's where we can get in trouble. And then just make sure when you're buying something that it makes sense, that it's something you need or really want. And finally, we're going to look at how to make a budget and then stick to it. So those are all the things that will help put you in charge of your money rather than your money being in charge of you. 4-step budget. So one of the things, again, how are you going to know what you spend? You really need to know what you have as far as money coming in. So you want to list all your monthly income and things like maybe you get a financial aid check at the beginning of the semester. But that money has to last you 3 or 4 months. So what you want to do is you want to prorate that on a monthly basis. And then, so that then you know what you have coming in. So that's, cash coming into your pocket. The next step is the monthly expenses, so that you understand all the money going out of your pocket. So list your regular expenses, if you've got rent, if you've got car payments, if you've got gas, whatever you have to spend money on, your lunch, if you go out regularly for lunch, whatever is included, that groceries, go ahead and list those so that you can see, do I have enough incoming to pay for all of that? And again, prorating something like maybe insurance you pay every 6 months, prorate that on a monthly basis so you can make that budget. Then at the end, you just subtract your expenses from your income, and that's what we call cash flow. If it's negative, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Not so good. You don't have enough money to meet everything and you're going in the hole. Sometimes we use credit cards to fill that hole, but those will eventually get maxed out and then you've got to deal with it. Okay, so cash flow, we want it to be positive, and that's what the budget is about, making sure you're doing. So once you see this, you can then make those needed adjustments. So you've got one of two choices to make. You got a negative cash flow, then you reduce your spending or increase your income some way. You wash some cars or mow some lawns or whatever you need to do. Okay. So we need to understand how savings work. We're going to look at the basic mathematics of loans a little bit later, but we're going to focus this time on the math of savings so we can see what's involved. It's also good, we won't talk about it in this class, but to understand how taxes are involved in your decisions. You probably, if you work, you've got money withheld for taxes, but there's all sorts of things you can do to address that. And then sometimes understanding how the federal budget might affect those taxes and such can be helpful. Again, these last two we won't cover here, but they are good topics to take a look at. In the Canvas, I have a PDF copy of this book. It was one given to me when I started working for my old boss back in 1990. We were doing financial planning, insurance, mutual funds, helping people plan out their retirement, and it's an interesting book. It talks about how everybody set back in ancient Babylon, but it said how no matter what you make, if you put away about 10% of what you make into savings and invest it well, everybody can retire usually within about 30 years, and the retirement will be able to pay their salary, so then they no longer need to work. We'll show you an example at the end. But again, 10% there, and also put about 20% to your debts, and then live off of 70%. So making that budget and living off it. So you're welcome to take a look at that. We're going to be using this is a financial calculator. There's a simple interest one. You don't have to use this one. If you have another one you'd like to use, you're welcome to it. But what we'll spell out here is each of these problems we're going to do, you will be able to fill in from the question all the unknowns except for one. The one that's missing is what the question is, and then the calculator will solve on that particular thing. So we'll work through some examples with the simple interest calculator. And simple interest just simply means you're paid your interest at one time and then it's done. Compound interest, you're paid it on a regular basis, so you start getting interest on top of your interest. There is a formula for simple interest, but again, we'll also be able to use this calculator to calculate. We put up here what we're going to solve for, and we have these factors. So every investment, whether simple or compound, will involve a principal, which is the amount of deposit into the account, the total amount in there. There may also be payments. We'll see the simple interest doesn't include payments, but we'll have payments. There's always a rate, interest rate, and that's usually a percentage. So this is 3.875%, and that's the percent you're getting back on your money. And it always has a time factor, usually in years, of how long it's left on deposit. And once we put those in, we get a future value or an accumulated value and of course with savings what we're looking for that amount to grow and be there for us. So we're now going to look at, so simple interest is you deposit some money, you get a set interest rate, you get it paid once. But if you use compounding, which is our advanced calculator, notice it has how often you get compounded. We're going to look at the effect of compounding more often. So the compounding means you're getting paid the interest that's owed to you, and then it's getting deposited into your account, and so you're going to get interest on top of your interest. That compounding can be a very powerful effect. The equation we use for this, again, this is embedded into the financial calculator, so we won't have to use these formulas, although we could. But what I want you to see out of here is the mathematics behind what's happening with savings. So again, we have what our investment is going to be worth in the future value. We have a present value, which is what it's worth now. It's how much we put into it. And we've got an interest rate, and the N here is the number of compounding periods. Y is number of years. So up here we have years times number of compounding period. And I want to ask you, which one do you think is more powerful the interest rate or the number of years we have it deposited? What could make the bigger difference? Not quite sure, but let's see. The interest rate, what's happening to the interest rate? Interest is getting multiplied by the deposit, the present value. So if we take 3 times 4, how much do we get?
12.
Good. Yeah. But if we took 3 and raised it to the 4th power, how much do we get now? It's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Or 9 times 9? 81. Which one is bigger? Exponential. So if we take sort of similar values, notice interest rate is going to be multiplied. So it does have an effect, but the thing that has the biggest effect on savings is time. And we're going to take a look at that. The more time we give ourselves, because time is the exponent. It's an exponential. So allowing enough time for all these things to happen is really the key to financial planning. So when should we start? As soon as we can. And we'll see how that works. Okay. But again, all the problems we're going to do, they will involve all of these, except one of them will be unknown. The others will be given to us in one way or another. We put them into the calculator and basically sort of click on the unknown part, and we'll get our answer. And again, we'll work through a few examples together on that. Here's an example. If you, the effect of compounding at 8%. The more often you compound, the more often you pay the interest, it's like getting a higher interest rate. So all of these calculations are done with a 8% interest rate, but the effect of compounding. So if I just pay it once a year, that's 8% interest. If we pay you quarterly, then you're getting interest on your interest. That's an additional 0.243. So you're getting more interest back, higher interest rate. And notice if we did it monthly, 12 times a year. So 4 is quarterly. 12 is monthly. We're getting more. And it goes up. The 365 would be daily interest. If we paid your interest daily, you get like 8.327. And what you start to see is that the more and more often, if you do it, what's this? This is 1 billion times a year. It's almost continuous. You can kind of see that the effect on the interest rate basically levels off. You only get so much of an effect. Okay. But what this should tell you is, yeah, if you can get monthly compounding, if you can get your interest paid to you monthly, that's pretty close to being the best. Again, daily would be a little bit better, but we're pretty close with monthly. Some credit unions still only do it quarterly. Okay, so checking out, credit unions are great places to be, but see if their savings plan, do they compound quarterly, or do they do it monthly, or do they do it daily? That would, so that will make a difference. And of course, more is better. So savings plans and investments. So savings plans, sometimes we have a deposit, but oftentimes what we're doing is we're making monthly payments into our savings. Maybe we have a job and our employer takes some of our money out and they invest it for us, or invest it in a plan that we pick. This would be the formula. And again, we won't be required to use this formula. This is embedded into the calculators. But again, where is the time? Mathematically, up in the exponent. So it's again multiplication. So the amount that we deposit, the interest rate that we deposit it at, those are important things. But the way we can really maximize things is to give ourselves that time. the more time something's deposited, the higher the value will be. Like if you had your great-grandparents put $1 away in a savings account for you 100 years ago, that $1 would be substantially, you could probably retire off of it. We'd all be rich if our great-grandparents had put a little bit of money away for us and not spent it, right? But they didn't. At least mine didn't. Maybe yours did. I hope so. Anyway, and then thinking of yourselves, if you have children, you know, the value of putting something away when they're young, it will grow. And we'll look at a specific example. There's also savings plans that, again, you start with some money, so you put a big deposit down. So this would be a single deposit. And then you could also make, say, monthly payments. So these are regular deposits on top of an initial deposit. And you see the mathematics, it's basically two different functions, two different formulas added together. So it's almost like the money is separate. We calculate them differently. Again, with the graphing, with the financial calculator, we don't have to worry about these. It's going to take care of it for us. Okay. But again, what I want to focus on is time is up in the exponent. That is what's going to make a big difference. You know, if you're able to invest for 10 years instead of 5, those extra 5 years could be a big bonus. And again, we have all the same stuff. We have a future value that it's calculating. We have a present value, which is what we put in initially. Regular payments. We'll have an interest rate. We'll have somewhere from the question, it'll tell us how often, how many times a year it gets compounded. Again, monthly would be 12, quarterly 4, so forth. And then we have time in years. And every question we have, we'll get all of this information somewhere, and one of the pieces will be missing, and that's the question. How much money will you have? That's question is future value. We've got everything else, and then we calculate future value. How much do you need to deposit? We'll have everything. We'll have the future value. We'll have everything, and then present value is what we will be solving on. And you'll see basically we fill in the boxes, click on the missing piece, and we'll have it. Simple as that. There are a few calculations that are more manual type calculations. One of them is this, there's a couple questions on calculating what's called total return. So that is an interest rate of how much did we earn from start to finish. Notice it does not incorporate time. We did this in something similar to what we did in Chapter 3 on percentages. Remember we had this percent change, which was the new minus the old divided by the old. So that's really what this is. This is future value, which is a newer value, minus the present value divided by the present value. So it's really the same thing. New minus the old divided by the old. Again, it will give you a decimal. If we multiply it by 100, that'll turn it into a percentage. So we'll look at a few examples because, again, there's a couple homework questions that ask you to calculate this. So here's our example. Suppose you decide to invest some money in real estate, 2004. The amount you invested, you bought some land, say, for $27,500. In 2013, you sold the land and you got $43,400. Nice little return. What is the total return? Again, future value minus the present value over the present value. Now, in this term, when we talk about present value, is even though we're 2023 right now, right? Present value would be what we started with, and the future value is what we ended with. So we'll put up 43,400 minus 27,500 divided by 27,500. That will give us our total return, and that's a formula down here. Put the parentheses just to be sure. And when you do that calculation, again, you get a decimal, but if you multiply by 100, you get 57.8%. Sounds like a pretty good return, right? Again, but it didn't include the time in there. So it's not that that's 57 per year, it's just 57 total return over that time. So that's one way, but it's really hard to compare investments because if you bought it and sold it sooner, looking at the total return, you can't really compare this two different investments with two different time periods. And so that's why there's also something called annual return. And there's some questions in the homework that will ask about the annual return. You can almost take the total return and divide it by the number of years, I guess. You'll get close. But the way to really get the annual return, you'll just take the future value divided by the present value. You put the exponent of 1 over the number of years, and then you subtract 1. So this is a formula we will need to use whenever they ask for annual return. So let's look at that same example, but now this is going to incorporate the time frame that it was 2004 to 2013, which is how many years? (2013 minus 2004) looks like 9 years. So we're going to see what would be an annual return on this. And again, they'll just use this other formula, 43,400, which is the future value, divided by the present value, and then raised to 1 over the number of years. So it was 9 years, 1/9. Then you subtract 1. We find that that is an annual return of 5.2%. Not as exciting as 57%, but it's accurate. This is something we could compare to other investments because it's an annual rate. Most investments should be compared on what their annual rate is, not what any specific short-term rate is or long, total return. We okay with both of those? Okay, so again, you have access to the slideshow, so if you need to, you can come back and, find these two formulas. Those are the only two formulas we're going to need to use. The calculators take care of everything else. Okay. So before we get into some examples, we'll talk that there are 3 main types of investments. One investment is buying stock, and what you're doing is you're actually buying ownership in a company when you buy a piece of stock. So you buy Apple, you own a piece of Apple. You actually have ownership in the company. If you have 1 share of stock, you get 1 vote on how to run the company. So that's why the people who own 1 million shares, their voice is louder. They have 1 million votes as far as what goes on. One of the problems with stock ownership is if the company goes bankrupt, then it's very difficult to get your money because you are an owner. The company lost money, you lost money. And that's just how it works. So you may win or lose. There is volatility, which means it can go up or down. You could gain money, but you can also lose money. So stocks have an inherent risk involved, yet at the same time, buying and selling at the correct times with the correct types of companies can be very lucrative. You can make a lot of money in a short period of time. You can lose a lot of money in a short period of time. And I've heard of and seen both situations. When I was in Corvallis, we had a sort of an investing guru who they called him the $1 million man because he came out of nowhere. He started investing, doing this day trading, and went from maybe $10,000. I can't remember what he started with, but he got where he had over $1 million portfolio. And then he got to 3 million, but then he kept going, and some of his investments weren't as good. I guess he was back down to about 500,000, which is still not bad, but you can go up, but you can also go down. Okay. Another type of investment with less risk is called a bond investment, where you're getting a promise to pay. It's a loan. You're making a loan to a company. So if you buy a bond, say an Apple, you don't own the company, you don't get to vote, but you have purchased a piece of paper that says Apple owes you some money. You are a creditor. And so this has some sort of protection if the company goes bankrupt. They have to sell their assets, and the bondholders get paid first because you have a lien on the company. You're a lender. People own stock, they get the last. So it's really a promise to pay. So typically you won't get as good of a return on a stock, but you also have that downside protection where the bond has a face value. They tell you how much interest they're going to pay and so forth.
Can you do both?
Yes, in fact, that's an investment program should have both. They typically will say as you get older, you should get more into bonds because you're going to start using your money. You want it maybe in a less volatile place. I still have a lot of mine in stocks because but the last few years have not been great. So you sit there and say, well, maybe I should have been in bonds. But a mix is always good. And what I do is, that it doesn't say it here, is I use mutual funds, which mutual funds you're paying a fund manager to buy and sell stocks and bonds for you. And then you read over the various funds and they have different strategies, and they tell you our strategy is to invest 50% in bonds, 50% stocks, whatever it is. They tell you what kind of stocks they look for, and then you pick out a fund that sort of matches what you do, and you get that diversity built in because they're buying a lot of different stocks, a lot of different bonds. They're mixing it, they're professionals, and they're managing it. Again, it doesn't guarantee anything, but it does have a bit more security than buying an individual stock. So that's how I go, is mix it up. And then the last kind is what's called cash. These are really short-term instruments, maybe like government bonds, where a government bond is still a loan, but so it's got that security, but it's very liquid, so you can go into them and come out of them. And again, mutual funds have these built in as well. So the mutual fund will have all three types of investments, and you have a fund manager who's managing it day to day for you. And again, you can even see the record of this group of people who've been managing, how have they done over time. Oh, they've done good. When things go down, they manage it so their fund doesn't go as far down. When things are going up, their funds are going up. So you can see how they've done in the past and then sort of choose, I want these people handling my money. And then you kind of put it on autopilot. But picking the right people, that's the big thing. So those are the three types of investments. Again, you can do it individually, or you can find some fund managers that will do it for you. And again, oftentimes there's a representative that will sell. In fact, one of my students from about 15 years ago. You guys know a guy named Meadowlark Lemon? You don't know Meadowlark Lemon? He's a Harlem Globetrotters. Anyway, his daughter went here, and she was in my class. I met Meadowlark Lemon when he was pretty famous. Of course, he passed away a few years ago and stopped playing a few years ago. But as far as basketball, and she contacts me from time to time. She's in financial planning. So sometimes you get to choose who you get to work with. Okay, so that's. And she doesn't actually make those decisions, but she has several different funds that she works for, and she does that. So here's the things we want to consider. Liquidity. When I invest my money, how fast can I get it out? I've got a retirement plan from ASU. They take it out of my paycheck. I never see it. They put it away. Sometimes in those type of plans, it's called a 401k. Sometimes you can withdraw it early. Sometimes you can take a loan. At ASU, they don't let us do any of that. So it's not liquid until I quit, until I stop working for them. So they do that on purpose because they don't want you using up your retirement. But sometimes you're going to want some money that's liquid because if you need to get to it, you want to be able to get to it. Real estate investments. not really liquid. You buy a house, can be a very good investment, but you've got to sell that property before you get your money out of it. And that can take sometimes several months. Risk, how volatile is it? Again, real estate has typically been something that doesn't have high risk. You can buy something and it might not get as much return as you like, but real estate typically holds its value, but not always. Sometimes it loses value. So everything has risk, and the risk is that you could actually lose some of your money. The other risk is that the investment won't make enough interest, won't make enough money to keep up with inflation. So your dollars are actually getting cheaper. You still have them, but they're not able to keep up with inflation. So that's also a risk. Everything, again, has risk. So we have to decide what kind of risk we're willing to take. And then finally, return. Generally, the higher the risk, the better the return. But not always. Sometimes you could take something that's very risky and you're almost guaranteed to lose your money. Some of these Ponzi schemes, right? Were very risky investments for people because they were investing in someone they thought they could trust, but that person they thought they could trust was just taking their money and spending it, not investing it for them. So return. So those are the three aspects we want to take into consideration. And again, the homework won't necessarily help you. It will give you how money works, but these kind of questions you still have to go through. Stocks, if you look at a rolling 20-year trend, you see stocks will average about 12% over any time, but there also have been some times, like the 1930s, here's 1929, and we see what's called the Great Depression, when there was a stock market crash. But that doesn't look so big in comparison to this stock market crash here right around the year 2000. And this only goes up to 2010. So we've got others. So it goes up, it goes down. So if you're investing in the stock market, you have to invest in a way that you are willing to either keep it invested, or you have a plan for when you're going to pull it out. Okay. Now I think this next one I'm trying to predict is an example I wanted to share with you. Two of my favorite students I had. Again, I told you about one. But I've got two students. They were twins. They took the class at the same time. They graduated, got a job at the same employer, doing similar things, getting paid the same amount. But one of them decided to follow the advice I gave him and started investing in a retirement plan right away. The other one didn't. Would you like to meet these two students? Here they are, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. So, okay, they're not really my students, but okay. Got at least a little smile. So, we could have two people that are very similar, and so we're going to look at this story where one invested right away, got their job, started. The other said, hey, I've been in college all these years, I want to enjoy myself, let me invest later. So here's Tweedledee, starting salary at age 25, $40,000, putting 10% away, again, and their employer puts it away for them. So this money grew to be $4,320 by the end of the year. So they only put $4,000 in, but they've made $320. Not really exciting yet, but let's see how things go. Tweedledum says, I'll get to my savings plan later. So 10 years, nothing going on here. After 10 years, salaries keep going up because they're doing good work. I can't remember, this is maybe what percent raise. But notice, since he's with their employer, they're putting 10% away. When his salary, Tweedledee, when his salary goes up, so does the amount that he's saving. And so at year 10, he saved $4,573. But look, from nothing in 10 years, he's got $66,000 now. His brother, sibling, has nothing. So the two got talking, and Tweedledee says, hey, I'll bet you can't catch me. I'll stop saving for for 10 years and you start savings, and Tweedledum says, I can pick up because we're making more money, I'll be putting more away. So what do you think? Another 10 years down the road, will Tweedledum have as much as Tweedledee? Tweedledee's not going to put any more money in. Tweedledum will start putting in their 10%. What do you think is going to happen? Not sure? Do you think they'll be able to catch them? Yes or no? No. And you're right. This money, because he left the money on deposit, right? It keeps growing even without any additions, not putting any money in. And Tweedledum, while he's putting in all this money, look at $5,000 a year, barely has half of what Tweedledee has. And that's 10 years. Well, how about another 10 years? You know, more money's going to go in, right? You think they'll catch him? Not sure. Still, so this is 20 years of nothing being put in, 20 years of putting in. Well, actually, 10 years initially putting in, and then 20 years of nothing. Still considerably ahead. 309 versus 255. And incidentally, these are all both invested at the same interest rate, same types of returns and everything. So there's no hocus pocus going on here. It's just the difference between starting right away or waiting 10 years. And by the way, I was the guy who probably waited 10 years because my first wife had an account. I said, I'll let her put away and I'll start later. Would have all worked out, but we knew that we got a divorce and she took her money and I took mine and I didn't have much, so I started again. So here's the thing, is now they're at 54. What happens at final when they're going to age 67 to retire? Yes, Tweedledum does finally catch up, but it took how many years? It took 33 years of putting in to catch up to 10 years of putting in and then stopping. Okay, so when we look at the details, Tweedledee put in $74,000 of their own money. See, what's the money here? Annual salary. Wait, no, that's the annual salary. Sorry, let's see. Savings balance was about the same. Oh, here it is. 42,000 was all he put in because he did that for 10 years. Tweedledum put in almost 200,000 to have the same, but that was because of starting later. Okay, so that's that power of compounding over time. Starting early, once you start, it's going to be hard to catch you. And again, some of us are older when we start, but it's just like, yeah, you could complain about that, but if you start today, it's better than starting 10 years from today. If you can, whatever you can do. If you don't have a job where you can do something, but as soon as you do, start something is the thing. Because then if you do even just a little bit, that money will grow and that, it's all there. And here's the real story. Do you think Tweedledee really would have said, I'm going to stop saving? I don't think so. You see, I got this. So had Tweedledee not stopped, they would have ended up with 1.6, almost 1.7 million. They would have still had double what Tweedledum did. And again, the only difference between these two is that first 10 years. That 42,000 made a difference of about 800,000 at retirement. Okay, so the difference here, just putting in early, this little, so you can see the power getting money in and working for you. And that's the goal behind this, is to understand how savings can work for you, how the money can become your employee if you use it correctly. And when you get it to a certain point, that interest off of that money will provide for your salary. In fact, just a rough estimate at 1.7 million, let's say 10% interest, that's about $170,000 a year. That certainly would cover the annual salary, $74,000, easily. You'll see, just the interest off of this. So you'll never use up your money. You're just taking out the interest. You can and they could have actually retired much earlier if they wanted to. And when your money is able to provide your income, then you have that freedom. You don't have to work for somebody else, or you don't have to even work in your own business. You can do what you want. And maybe volunteer, or maybe whatever it is you want to do, you'll be able to do it. To me, that's what retirement's about. I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping to get there. And that's our last slide. So what I'd like to do now is we'll work through a few of the quiz questions together so we can see how we can make these calculations now that we've got this kind of overview of what happens. So let's open this one. Let's go to the Lesson 5 quiz. Chapter 5 quiz. Set up. Let's go to teacher preview. Okay, so this first question, let me make it a little bit bigger. Janelle invests $13,000 at 5%, simple interest. So one of the things you want to look at is the interest simple or compounded. If it's simple, we have to use the simple interest calculator. Okay, 13,000, 5% for 16 years. Round your answers to the nearest cent. So 13,000, what value is that? Is that future value, present value, or payment? We could think it's going out of her pocket, but since it's a single one, we want to call it a principal or a present value. Payments will only be if it's done on a regular basis. But you're right, it is a payment out of her pocket, but we'll put this as present value. How about the 5%? That's a rate, yeah. And then the 16 years, that's the time, sometimes listed as Y or T. So let's see if we can go over to the financial calculator, simple interest calculator. Solve for the total principal plus interest. So the accumulated value. What we need to do is put in the principal or the present value. That was 13, right? The interest rate. What was the interest rate? 5%. So we put it in this way, and then the time in years was 15. And it's years, notice we could put other things, but it's 15 years. And then we just need to calculate. And this gives us the accumulated value, so the total, but it also gives us how much interest, which was $9,750. Okay, so we go back and say how much interest is earned over the 16-year period, or 15-year period. Did I have the right? Was it 15 or 16? It's 16 years. Sorry. I make up things. So not 15 years, 16. Got to do this again. But notice I just have to change that number, hit calculate, and it will update everything. So my interest is right here. I've also got the equation if I want to sort of do the math myself, but 10,400. In fact, they even do some of the calculations down here below so you can see what's going on. Interest is 10,400. And then the total is how much is in that account, 23,400. So that's the 13,000 we deposited, or she deposited, plus the interest, 23,400. So see, the mathematics for us is not so hard. It's just knowing where the values go. And if you get them wrong, sometimes you'll get, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. Okay, so question 2, another simple interest. So we see here it's saying that it's simple interest, so we're going to use a simple interest calculator. But this is a little different. He wants to invest $5,400. Determine the interest rate required for Juan's investment to double in value in 20 years. So we know the time. Do we know what the future value is? The future value is going to be twice. They want it to double. So 2 times what he puts in. $10,800. So this is what I mean. We're going to put in the future value. We're going to put in the present value. We're going to put in the number of years. But what we're going to have it solve for is what kind of an interest rate do we need to make that happen. Simple interest calculator. We're not solving for the total amount. We're solving for the rate. So notice that that's one of the first things we have to choose. We're telling it it's solving for the rate, then it gives us the total amount or the future value. That was 10,800, double what we started with. The principal was 5,400. The number of years was 20. And now when we calculate it, it will give us the interest rate that we need to earn. So we calculate, as long as they get 5% per year, they're going to be just fine. They'll be able to achieve this. Of course, if they get more, that's even better. But 5%. But you see how that works, that whatever we're solving for, we've got to have all the other values. And then we solve on that one. See if that works. Yes, it works. Questions, or doing okay? Okay. Now this next one, we're going to do, we won't do all of these, but we'll do maybe a few of these. So this one, it doesn't tell us simple interest, but it does tell us that the amount that we are investing, how long we're going to invest it, and then we want to find the future value depending upon the different compounding. So compounded annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, daily. Okay, and this will be our future value. So now this is the first time we're going to use the finance calculator, and I want to highlight something. So when we're using this calculator, anytime money goes away from us, this is specifically when we get to loans especially, we want to think of that as negative money. So if they're going to deposit $2,600, does that money go away from them? Yes, it does, because they have to give up use of that money. They're giving it to the bank who will use it for them. So we'll make that negative, 2,600. Okay. Now there is no payments, no regular payments. They do just the one time, right? They're investing the money. They're not making regular payments. We're going to go for 10 years. That's actually going to be part of a calculation. We're going to calculate the future value, so we don't know that, but we were given an interest rate. They're all 5.4%. Oops, make sure we're in the right one. So 5.4. Now let's talk about periods. So the first one, they want to compound annually. The number of periods is how often they compound times the number of years. So notice this is going to be for 10 years. So 10 times 1, we will put in 10. But watch how this is going to change as the compounding changes. So we're not directly entering the number of years. We're taking the years times the number of times it gets compounded in a year. So annual compounding is 1 compounding. 1 times 10 is 10. That's there. I've got everything else in here. We'll have the interest set at the end. We'll talk about when we do mortgage loans, we change it over to beginning, but we'll leave it at end. And then we just click on this button for the future value. And notice it's going to be positive, $4,399.26. The nice thing is you can actually copy this. That's what I like to do, because you're going back and forth here, right? And then paste it. And it puts it right in there for you. I'm going to just do this. We'll do one final check, but notice as I'm going, that's the correct answer. Okay. Let's go ahead and do semi-annually. We won't, again, do all of these, and then we'll maybe jump down to E. So compounded semi-annually, what we need to change is the compounding is no longer annually. Semi-annually is twice a year. So the periods is no longer 10. It is going to be 20, right? 10 times 2. So this will be 20. Rate stays the same. Present value stayed the same. And I don't actually even, I could delete this if I want, but if I just click on future value, it will update. More interest, right? Because they're compounding twice a year. That extra compounding, we now have $4,429.78. I think this works. This puts a comma. Sometimes that messes things up, but let's see. I'll see if it works. Notice mine has a comma, theirs doesn't. It might tell me I'm wrong, but then we'll go take the commas out. And then again, you're going to see that. Let's go with monthly, because a lot of times that's a standard. Everything's compounded monthly. Monthly is how many times a year? It's 12 times a year, so I have to take 12 times 10 years. That's going to be 120 periods, 120 months of compounding. Oops, I'm in the wrong calculator, so be careful about that. 120 is here. Compounding periods. Let's see what that does to the future value. It should kick it up a bit. Whoops. Oh, I also have to change the compounding periods to monthly, because otherwise that was taking it figured it was many more years. Yeah, that was way too much. 4,456. Okay, so you'll see how you do these multiple times. You'll get to see, and it did. It marked them correct. The 2 I didn't answer or I didn't get points for, but that's fine. Questions on that? How to use the compounding? Okay, good. So you've got to change the compounding to match how often, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly. But then you also have to change the periods. That periods is always the number of years times how many times a year it's compounded. 12, 4, whatever it is. Okay. How much would you need to deposit in an account now in order to have $6,000 in the account in 15 years? So this $6,000 is what kind of a value? That's going to be a future value. That's what's going to come back to us. What we're going to calculate is what we need to deposit now. And we're going to see that as we put this in, it'll be negative. We're told we've got 15 years, we get 2% interest, and it's compounded quarterly. So notice we have to have all the details before we can use the calculator. We can only have one detail that we don't know, which in this case is the future value. Let's see, get into the right calculator. So we don't know the present value. That's what we're solving for. I'll just put a 0 there. We're not making any payments yet. What was the future value we wanted? We want $6,000. And we want that to return to us, so we make that positive. Interest rate, I think, was 2%. 2%. It's compounded quarterly and for 15 years. So quarterly compounding, 15 years, and that's going to be 15 times 4, right? Because quarterly, 60. I think 15 times 4 is 60. We put that in, and then we calculate on the present value. This will tell us how much we need to deposit in the initial. And notice it's negative, because that's money that has to go away from us. We give that money to the bank. 15 years later, the bank gives us $6,000. Now, the thing is when we put this in, we don't want to put the negative. So when I copy this, I'm going to copy everything except the negative, because they want to know how much we put in. That's the amount of money we put in, but we don't put the negative. And again, it will always get it right. So these financial calculators, they all work. They got those formulas in there. You go get a loan, and like I said, when you go to get a loan, that's why I encourage you. I've got these same apps downloaded. They're free to download in the iStore, the Apple Store, and the Android. So have them with you, so you can make these calculations, and nobody can pull things over on you. Got 2 more left to go, or is it? No, we only got 1 more. So this one. A bank features a savings account that has an annual percentage rate of 2.8% with interest compounded monthly. Okay, so we've got some details there. Compounding is monthly, 2.8% interest. Tivia deposits $3,000 into the account. How much will Tivia have in the account in 1 year? Okay, so let's see. Again, it's compounded interest. So 3,000 goes in. Again, it's negative because Tivia has to give up access to the money. There are no payments. There will be some that have payments. Just remember, if you're depositing additional money in, you would also put that as negative. That's money going away. We're going to calculate this later. The annual rate, 2.8%. Number of periods, it's compounded monthly, right? Or what did it say? Compounded monthly for 1 year. Compounded monthly for 1 year. So that's going to be 12 periods, right? 1 times 12. We could then calculate how much we've earned. Started with 3,000. 3,085, so you can see how much interest was earned, and 3, I should have just copied it, right? 0.09. And I just want to show you how we can do this. So the APY, annual percentage yield, so remember this is not total return, it's annual return. So for this one, we have the future value divided by the present value raised to the 1 over y power. We don't put in the compounding. So future value was 3,085.09. Present value was 3,000. And we raised that to it was 1 year, so 1 over 1, which is 1. So really we just need to do this division here. And we could use just a simple calculator for that one. $3,085.09 divided by 3,000. 1.02836. Now remember, this 100, it's like 100% is that we're getting all our money back. So the increase, it's increasing, right? It's above 1. It's going to be 2.84%. Rounded to the nearest hundredth of a percent would be 2.84. 2.84. And that's what we get. So notice at 2.8%, we're getting a little bit extra interest because we're getting compounding monthly. So the rate they're stating is 2.8%, but the actual yield, the amount of money we get out of it, is a little bit higher because of the monthly compounding. So that worked. Okay, so those are our quizzes. You'll see in the homework there will be some where you have some monthly statements, but you're going to basically just use these two calculators. There'll be a couple examples where you need to use the equation. That's either total return or annual return, like we did on that last one. But otherwise, you're using the financial calculator, either simple interest or compound interest, and working through those. You'll have all the values to put in, but one thing will be unknown. That's what you're solving on. And so the thing you get to do now is you get to kind of figure out what goes where. And that's where the struggle is, maybe a little bit, but keep going forward. If you've got a TI-84, they also have a financial calculator built in that looks very similar. So you're welcome to use those. They all work the same. All right. So that's our lesson for today. I'm going to stop